FORA.tv. The world is thinking.
First of all, okay, so I think when people think of robots, they think of what we see from Japan. So these are robots that play violins or kick a soccer ball, football, whatever it's called. And these are, really impressive, amazing robots. But the problem with them is that they're really expensive. Each of these robots cost a few $1,000,000. And at the end of the day, they're not that practical. They don't really do much. The robots that are being built that are cheap and that are actually useful are being done so for military purposes, strictly for military purposes. Now the companies that are making these robots for the military, their long-term goal is not to continue building robots for the military, because relatively speaking, that's a pretty small market. They ultimately want to be able to sell robots to you and me and to everybody, right? They want to have robots in everybody's homes, because that's zillions and zillions of dollars of potential profit. So what they're learning, though, with the military is they're learning how to make them cheap and they're learning how to make them useful. So one of the main companies that I talk about in the book, which I kind of consider the IBM of robots or the Microsoft of robots, is a company based in Boston called iRobot. Mm-hmm. And they build their big military robots called the PackBot, which can dispose of bombs or explore caves and that sort of thing. And they're being used in Afghanistan and Iraq. But they're also the most successful consumer robot company. They make the Roomba, the vacuum cleaner, which is kind of the frisbee-shaped thing. And so when I spoke to the company, they told me all about how the Roomba came about from lessons that they had learned from the military. And they said it's sort of the same principles, which is that if you don't make a robot that's cheap, if you put any sort of fat into it, it's not going to sell. And also, if it's not useful, if it doesn't actually achieve its purpose, it's not going to sell. So, and they've been successful with this vacuum cleaner. I've never tried it, so I don't know if it's any good. No. But then to get to the sex robots, I went to CES. We were talking about the Consumer Electronics Show, which is the big show in January in Las Vegas, where all of the new stuff this year was 3D TVs. But every year, right next door to CES is, of course, the porn convention. And this year there was big news there, and a lot of mainstream media went to the porn convention. The New York Times was there because they were there to cover the debut of the world's first sex robot, which was something called Roxxxy. And it was pretty much a letdown. It was essentially what this guy showed off was kind of just a talking sex doll. And so I think everybody was disappointed. But the fact that all of this mainstream media was there to cover the sex robot is pretty indicative of what kind of mainstream interest there is in the sex robot. And there's a quote in the book from the head of the European Robotics Commission or something like that. And he said something like, if people are willing to pay to have sex with blow-up dolls, anything that moves is going to be an upgrade, or something to that extent.
But it was interesting. You then went on to argue that that with the advent of robots, perhaps the first industry that will be dramatically affected by losing their jobs would be prostitutes.
Yes. In Japan, actually, Japan and a few other countries, I find is mind-blowing. You can actually, sex robots are kind of going to be the evolution of the dolls that are currently available. One of the main things, or one of the big ones out there, is something called the Real Doll, and these things cost about $7,000, and they have, fully articulated steel skeletons and latex skin. And if you look at photos of these things, they're kind of almost indistinguishable from real people. I'm sure in real life they actually look a lot more fake, but. So the sex robots are going to be the evolution of that. So anyways, in Japan, there's also several Japanese makers of these kind of sex dolls. You can actually go to brothels and pay to have sex with sex dolls, which I know.
Only in Japan.
No, but it's in a few other countries. I think one of the Scandinavian countries, you can do the same thing. It's just bizarre. So yeah, I mean, if there's a market for that, there's going to be a market for sex dolls.